Like a drum, my heart beats adoration. And every breath you give me testifies. All I want to bring to you is praise. All I have to offer is a living sacrifice. Holy Spirit, come and fill. Light me up with holy fire. Fill my cup and make me still. In your presence I am shaken. Height or depth, no, there is none that will cast me from your presence. Fear and awe have me undone. Love and mercy like a flood come down. Oh, holy ground. With every circumstance you write a song, like a maestro waving his baton. When the testing comes, I bring faith. When the victory comes, I bring praise. Holy Spirit, come and fill. Light me up with holy fire. Fill my cup and make me still. In your presence I am shaken. Holy Spirit, come and fill. Light me up with holy fire. Fill my cup and make me still. In your presence I am shaken. Hide no depth, no, there is none that will cast me from your presence. Fear and awe have me undone. Love and mercy like a flood come down. Oh, holy ground. Holy, holy, you are holy. Holy, holy, you are holy. Sing worthy, 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 you are worthy. Sing worthy, 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 you are worthy. Sing holy, 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 you are holy. Holy, holy, you are holy. Sing worthy, 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 you are worthy. Take it up, sing worthy, 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 you are worthy. Worthy, worthy. All right, well, welcome to our Wednesday study. Holy, 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 thrice holy. What a great hymn that was. And that song you just heard, that is hot off the press. So yesterday in my devotional time, that song was the topic of my time with the Lord. And so that's written just yesterday. And I'd like to introduce it to the church family on Sunday. So we're going to sing that as a church family in corporate worship on Sunday. So you got a sneak peek if you tuned in to our midweek study here. Well, Proverbs chapter 23 starts off really with the same thought from the previous chapter. And so I want to start in Proverbs 23:29, where it says this: "Do you see a man who excels in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before unknown men." And then he says, "When you sit down to eat with a ruler, consider carefully what is before you." Okay, so we're just moving right in. There's not really a break at all. And it's helpful to know that we're talking about kings and those kinds of rulers, because if you weren't aware of that, you might think he's talking about sitting down and trying to eat food with some sort of measuring stick. So I prefer to eat with a fork rather than a ruler or a measuring stick. But that's not what it's talking about. Fortunately, it clears that problem right up from the last chapter. And then, speaking of utensils, he says, "And put a knife to your throat if you are a man given to appetite." Okay, so we're talking about the being in the presence of power, being in the presence of fame and fortune, and the corrupting effect that can have on the carnal man. And it has to do with the appetite. The appetite of your heart, particularly, is what Solomon is concerned about. I believe he's not just talking about the appetite of the carnal nature, the old nature, our flesh, but he's actually talking about something that is greater than that. He's calling his son to have an appetite for spiritual food, for spiritual things, for wisdom, for truth. And that's going to be the theme of this proverb as we work our way through it. Verses 1 through 11 really focus on the things not to waste your time with, right? And then we move into, hey, spend your time on these things. And then it concludes back with some more of the same that we started off with. So, having a heart that has a growing appetite and a hunger for what is good, for what is pure, for what is right, for what is noble, for what is godly, for what is Christ. So fix your eyes on Jesus, and you'll find that your appetite for spiritual food, for spiritual nourishment, will grow. Do you lack a hunger for the Word of God? Well, you got to cultivate that. You got to cultivate it. And there are things that you can do to direct your heart. This is what Pastor Jim talked about just this weekend out of Luke chapter 12. He was talking about where you're, particularly with money, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. If we go over to Luke 12:20, we can just go there right now while we're at it as our intro. Luke chapter 12, verse 20. It says this: "But God said to him, 'Fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Then whose will those things be which you have provided?'" 21. "So is he who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God." This was the parable of the rich fool who built the bigger barn. And we just covered this on Sunday, this last weekend, as Jim took us through this. And we are reminded here in this psalm that we need to have our affections and our appetite set towards things of the Lord, spiritual things, eternal things,
all that is temporary is going to pass away. Obviously, that's why it's temporary. So, and this advice, if we pay attention, we will be directing our hearts towards Christ-likeness, towards godliness, towards eternal rewards, rather than those that can grow wings and fly away. So, do you see a man who, verse 1. When you sit down to eat with a ruler, consider carefully what is before you, and put a knife to your throat. If you are a man given to appetite, do not desire his delicacies, for they are deceptive food. Again, this corrupting power is going to have its effect on you if you are walking in the old nature. What I mean by the old nature, that's what Paul talks about. But what I mean by the old nature is the one we're born with. We need to be reborn. We need to be born again, as we are called to be in the New Testament. We need to be born again. And how are you born again? By putting your faith in Jesus Christ and in Him alone. Trust in Him, and He will give you a new life. Well, you say, Matt, what do I trust in Him about? What is it that He did, or who is He that I should put my trust in Him? Well, you put your trust in Him because He demonstrates His love for you, and that while you and I are still in our sin, He died for us, right? We deserved death, but He died in our place. He was our substitute. And if we put our trust in Him and in Him alone, then what He did for us on the cross to wash us clean, to take care of our sin, what He did for us, then would count for us, that we would be seen by God through the lens of Christ, that He would look at us and say, wow, you're pure and spotless like my Son, the Lamb of God that was slain for us. He looks at us through that lens and says, enter in. I see you as righteous. Come on into my presence, and enter into the splendor of heaven. So when we are walking in the Spirit, we don't fall into these traps. When we walk in the flesh and the old nature, we are prone to have our carnal appetites filled rather than our spiritual appetites. And so you can kind of think of it as a spectrum. As we invest in our spiritual life, our appetite for spiritual things grows. But if we neglect the Spirit and we starve the Spirit and we instead feed the flesh, then our flesh gets stronger and our appetite for fleshly things, temporary things, grows. And as that happens, we starve the Spirit and just feed our flesh. And this Father's telling His Son, hey, starve the flesh, feed the Spirit, and you will be blessed. Verse 4, it says, do not overwork to be rich. Okay, so riches, that is going to be one of the big themes that this Father is telling His Son. Hey, watch out for worldly riches. And don't be overworking with the motivation of your heart being, I just want more money. Because that is going to be a trap for you. So don't overwork. He doesn't say don't work. He says don't overwork to be rich. There's the motivation that He's speaking to. So work is good. Now, overwork is by its definition is you're working too much. There's a limit and you've gone past it. It's overworking, and the motivation is carnal, just so that you can gain worldly possessions. Building bigger barns. Because of your own understanding, cease, He says. Will you set your eyes on that which is not? For riches certainly make themselves wings. They fly away like an eagle toward heaven. So picture an eagle taking those thermals up You've seen a bird like that. It just gets smaller and smaller and smaller in the sky till it's barely even visible to the naked eye. And that's what it's like when you are chasing after riches. Those riches, even that you think you have secured, they can just grow wings and they can just fly away. And they will. They will depart from you, or rather you will depart from them, and other people will enjoy your riches, because we are all subject to death, to be separated from these bodies of ours in one way or another. Do not overwork to be rich, because of your own understanding cease, he says. So we're back to that barn idea. Don't just build up those barns with the motivation of your heart being riches. I'm just reminded again, every time you see that barn on Sundays, when we go out there and we worship in that place, remember that is a place that you can be reminded, hey, I need to be storing up. I need to be using everything that God's given me for spiritual purposes, rather than to store up for my flesh, to store up for myself, to be a miser. Speaking of misers, verse 6 says, do not eat the bread of a miser, nor desire his delicacies. For as he thinks in his heart, so he is. Eat and drink, he says to you, but his heart is not with you. The morsel you have eaten, you will vomit up and waste your pleasant words. Okay, so what's going on here in 6 through 8? This miser, and yet he's saying, hey, eat and drink. And then you're not, all of a sudden you find yourself throwing up and wasting words. What's going on here? Well, let's go to Blue Letter Bible, which I always encourage you to take a look at. All I did here was I typed in Proverbs 23, verse 1, and I did the New King James Version here. And so it'll take you right here. So we're going to scroll down to verse 6, where it says, do not eat the bread of a miser, nor desire his delicacies. I'm curious, maybe you are too, what is this miser? It's not a word that we use very commonly. I think of Ebenezer Scrooge when I think of miser. So let's go and check out what the Hebrew has going on here. So we're going to scroll down. An evil eye. That's interesting, isn't it? Normally, you actually see the word in there. We're going to do a forward inline. So what this does, the forward inline, is it shows us kind of the order of the Hebrew. So it's going to not flow very nice in English, but what we're going to see is kind of the order. As a Hebrew person says words, that's the order that we're looking at here. So there's nothing, we have to add him that hath. We have to add that in English. The bread of is lehem. Then there's no English word for et. Then eat thou not. Eat thou laham al. So lehem laham. Lehem et laham al. So kind of a little alliteration there in Hebrew. Lehem laham. Desire neither an eye evil. Okay, so this is where we're getting this miser combination here. An evil eye. That's interesting. Okay, so let's ayin. That's probably just an eye. Let's click on evil. What is this? What is this word here? Ra. So we have evil, wickedness, wicked, mischief, hurt, bad, trouble, sore, affliction, adversity, ill-favored harm, not. Okay, it's mostly used 442 times as evil. So here's the outline. This gives you an idea. Evil, bad, disagreeable, malignant. I think makes me think of cancer. We got worse than, sad, unhappy, evil. And then we're going to go back and let's go back to an eye. So 5869. We'll go to this word, ayin, and we're going to look at this. It's your physical eye. Let's see, this is 495 times. It's just translated eye. Sight, color, fountain, well. It can be used in these ways. Fountain, interesting. So eye, physical eye, as showing mental qualities of mental and spiritual faculties. A spring or a fountain. So interesting, in Hebrew, the eye is also used to talk about a fountain or a spring. So an evil spring or an evil fountain, when you look into somebody's eye and you see evil springing up out of it, I think that's kind of what we're the idea of what we're looking at here. One of the ways that you can tell if a word is or a phrase is hard to translate is when you go to the Bible tab on the verse. Here it is. Do not eat the bread of a miser, nor desire his delicacies. You go to the Bibles, and this gives you all the translations for it. And when there are a lot of different translations kind of disagree and they say it differently. Selfish man, selfish person, a stingy person. There's all these different, miser, a begrudging host, an evil eye. When you have that much variety in all these translations, it's a really good sign that you should go to the interlinear tab. And that's where you can really dig in with the Hebrew. And once again, you don't have to be able to read this, right? You don't have to be able to sound all this Hebrew out. You don't have to do that. You don't have to go to seminary to interact with the Hebrew. You can just start clicking. And that's why I find this so fun. Lahem. So I like that. Laham al lahem. And if you don't know how to say it, let's just do this. This is fun.
Strong's H3898. Lachem. Lachem.
All right, so lahem al.
Strong's H3899. Lechem.
Lachem, lechem. Okay, so there you go. You can even have some fun with the alliteration there on that. So once again, there you have it. You have all the tools right there for you that you need, and we've only looked at the interlinear and the Bibles. While we're here, I want to show you one more tool. If you go down here to commentaries, I found that in the book of Proverbs, David Guzik does a really good job at going through the Proverbs verse by verse. A lot of these guys will go through in just sort of general, brush strokes through the book of Proverbs, but Guzik does a good job in Proverbs, and so I've been enjoying that. So if you click on his Proverbs 23, and you scroll down and you find the verse that you want, and I'll just, since we're on this miser verse in verse 6, let's scroll down and find verse 6. Proverbs 23:9. Oh, we passed it up. Here we go. Do not eat the bread of a miser. The ruler's table was a dangerous place, but so is the table of the miser, the one with an evil or ungenerous eye. The miser, the envious or covetous man, who secretly grudgeth thee the meat which he sets before thee. As this phrase is used in Proverbs 28:22, Matthew 20:15. As on the contrary, a liberal man is said to have a good eye in Proverbs 22:9. And that's from Poole. So, so back up here. So you see the idea here. Let's go back up here to the camera here. And so you see the idea is the situation of a man sitting before a guy who's saying, hey, eat. I've just laid out my delicacies before you. Go ahead and eat them. But it says his heart is not with you. So he's saying, he's using words of generosity. He has all of his nice table spread out for you, but he's going to hold it against you if you take him up on it, right? So it's this idea of a guy who has evil in his eye. He's saying one thing with his mouth, but his eyes are telling you something else. And if you see that, man, stay away. Just pass. Say, no, go ahead. I don't want any of your delicacies today. I'm on a diet. Because you will, it says you're going to be throwing it up, and you're going to be wasting any pleasant words that you have with this person. Oh, thank you so much. Okay, I'll take some. Well, he's not going to appreciate, even though he's saying, go ahead and eat. One of the advantages Christians have is that we have, one of them, the advantage that Christians have is we have God's Spirit that has been poured out on all who would put their trust in him, who would receive his Spirit gladly. And the very Spirit of God is willing to give us insight. Discernment is what we call it often. And that he could help you discern what is the appropriate thing to do in this circumstance. And so take advantage of the Spirit of God that's been poured out in your life. He is wisdom with a capital W, the Spirit of wisdom given to you to help you make a call like this, to look into somebody's eye and prayerfully consider, is this invitation one that I should take up or not? And what an advantage we have as Christians. Now, we don't always take advantage of the Spirit of God, but we ought to. We ought to. Verse 9, it says, do not speak in the hearing of a fool, for he will despise the wisdom of your words. So if there's a fool and you've discerned that this person is not interested in wisdom, you know what? Don't waste your words. Just be quiet. It would be better in that situation. But should you have somebody seeking to become more wise, and you have words of wisdom to share, particularly if it's evangelistic, if it's salvation through Christ, his sacrifice on the cross for their sins, and that you could help them go from death to life by giving them the good news, then by all means, speak up. But if you're discerning a yellow light, then slow down. And if you're discerning a red light, if it's a fool that you're speaking to, you might best just stop speaking. Verse 10, do not remove the ancient landmark. Okay, so what's going on here? Well, take a look at the previous chapter in verse 28. So just above here, depending on where these words fall on your Bible page. On mine, it's on the same page, verse 28 of chapter 22. It says, do not remove the ancient landmark, which your fathers have set. And then we have this verse repeated, or this idea repeated, almost exactly, do not remove the ancient landmark. Well, whenever we have repetition, it means, hey, pay attention. Repetition. It means pay attention and pay attention and pay attention. So let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 19:14, which is all the way back where we would, I don't know if it's the first, but it's in the law, and it's probably one of the first times we see this crop up in the scriptures. So Deuteronomy 19. It's not the first time because Leviticus comes before Deuteronomy, so I'm sure it's in Leviticus and Numbers. But the second giving of the law, Deuteronomy 19, which is the name that is given to Deuteronomy, the second giving of the law. All right, I'm taking a second to get here so that none of us have an excuse to find it. Deuteronomy 19. And let's see, what verse are we on? 14. Okay. It says this, you shall not remove your neighbor's landmark. Okay, there we have it again. Which the men of old have set. All right, well, we had that as well. In your inheritance, which you will inherit in the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess. So, the landmarks are connected to the idea of inheritance. The landmarks say this boundary line is for these people. It belongs to these people. And on this side of the boundary line, it belongs to these people. Now, moving a boundary line is stealing from somebody. You're stealing, you're expanding your border, and you're taking from somebody else's possession. And remember, God set these boundaries. And just as a principle that we can take from this for our lives, beyond just, I don't think it would be wise for you to go be moving boundary markers in your neighborhood. That's going to get you in trouble with the law as well. But so that's true for all time. You don't want to be moving boundaries. But man's tendency is to move boundaries, all kinds of boundaries. Anytime we see a line, anytime we see a rule, our carnal nature wants to say, hey, is there a loophole? Can we skirt around this boundary? Can we transgress this boundary and get away with it? Can we just move it? I'm not changing the boundary. I'm just kind of moving it. I'm just nudging it along a little bit. It's just not where I want it to be. Sometimes we just blow right through them and we just pretend that the boundaries aren't even there because of what we see with our eyes, we want. And so we just go get it, or we just do it, whatever's right in our own eyes. Well, how did that work for the nation of Israel? Well, not so well. Just read the book of Judges. When they did what was right in their own eyes, it didn't turn out so well. God loves us. That's why he gives us boundaries. Just like a parent that loves their children, he says, hey, don't do this. Or a mother that says, sweetheart, don't do that. Don't touch that. That's hot. You're going to get burned. I remember when my son was very small, just learning to walk. And that was a terrifying time for me as a new father, because he was just kind of establishing his own will. And if you know anything about the toddler stage, and they're establishing their own will and they're the beginnings of their independence. They got the umbilical cord attached. They just learned to walk, and they're discovering, I can go places. I can do whatever I want. Well, in comes the parent who says, no, you cannot. You can't go wherever you want. You can go here, you can go there, but you can't go there. That will get you dead, all right? And so when I would say to my son, hey, Asher, I'd call out his name. Hey, can you come here? Come here. He would hightail it in the opposite direction. And it was terrifying, because sometimes that's the matter of life and death. I mean, if I'm saying, hey, come here, and there's a road, and he splits in the other direction, and he hightails it right for the road, and a car drives by and flattens him, it's death. That's what happens when you disobey as a toddler, and your parents are saying, hey, it's not safe by that road, come here. And they just go, ooh, a boundary, let me run past it and see what happens. I'm just curious. Well, flat you go, like a pancake. And that was absolutely terrifying, because for a while, I didn't know if he would ever learn to listen and obey. And I just thought, man, he might die before he listens and he obeys. Well, thankfully, he learned to listen. He learned to obey. But it came with some correction. It came with some chastisement. It came with some discipleship, some training, some teaching, some parenting. And so we move on to verse 13. Let's see. I skipped a couple verses here. We're going to get there to 13. That's where I want to go, but let's keep reading. Verse 11. For their Redeemer is mighty and will plead their cause against you. Okay, so the fields of the fatherless, that's the idea of someone taking advantage of a family that has land, but their father has died, and so there's no protector of that land. And so when people are going in and they're misusing the land, or they're stealing harvest, and because there's no protector, it's saying there's a redeemer that is mighty. A rich relative that's going to come as the Redeemer and say, I am going to take care of you, who took advantage of the weaker, of the poor. And I like how it's capitalized here in my translation, for the Redeemer is mighty. And certainly our Redeemer, Jesus Christ, is mighty. He is the Redeemer. And when we are wronged, he is going to redeem us. And he is mighty to save. He will save the fatherless. He will save the widow. He will save the orphan, the one who is weak. He is able to redeem and able to save. And not just from injustice, but from our own justice, the justice that we deserve, death. He is able to redeem us even with that by his blood. So thank God for that. He will plead our cause to the Father as our advocate. He'll say, Lord, or he'll say, Heavenly Father, they're with me. They're covered. And the Father says, oh, they're with you? Come, welcome. Anyone who is with my Son is welcome in my kingdom. Okay, then it says 12, apply your heart to instruction and your ears to words of knowledge. Apply your heart. This is the Father speaking to his Son saying, hey, you need to take your heart and direct it towards instruction. Okay? Apply your heart. Take your heart and say, instruction, I'm welcoming it. Let's go. I want to learn. I want to grow. And then your ears to words of knowledge. This right here is where we get our instruction. This right here is where we get our knowledge. It's the Word of God. We need to apply our hearts and our ears. Our eyes need to fall on the pages of the Scriptures of the Word with a capital W, so that we can gain instruction, gain knowledge, and have our appetite for those things grow. And then here we are in the context of that father-child relationship. Verse 13. Excuse me. Do not withhold correction from a child, for if you beat him with a rod, he will not die. You shall beat him with a rod and deliver his soul from hell. Okay, I want to go to Blue Letter Bible for this one because the whole New King James and the words for beating doesn't really sit very well with our current politically correct culture. So we are going to go to verse 13 here. And do not withhold correction from a child, for if you beat him with a rod. Let's take a look at this. We're going to go to interlinear. And let's do forward in line. So this is the order of the Hebrew, forward in line. For correction from the child, withhold not with the rod, not with the rod. Thou beatest him. Okay, so we're going to take this word takenu and we're going to give it a click. Or naka is actually the word. I said that wrong.
H 52:21. Nacha.
Nacha. Okay. Not that I'm going to remember that. You might, but I will not remember that. But it's still fun to listen to, nonetheless. Okay, so we have most often translated smite, slay, kill, beat, slaughter, stricken, given, wounded. Wait, given? That's interesting. Given is very different than smite and kill and interesting. Strike and stripes. Okay, when I think of some of these words, I think of what Jesus endured for us. He was wounded for our transgressions. He was struck, and he had, by his stripes we are healed. So that's interesting. We're the wayward child, and he took the beating for us, if we want to use the word beat. But to strike, to smite, to hit, to slay, to kill, it can mean a lot of different things. So it's very wide. It's basically just anything where you're striking, and it can have different effects. It can kill the person, or it can just be, smite, chastise, receive a blow, to be wounded, to be beaten. So obviously we're not talking about killed, because it's talking about not getting killed. So it's not that. So it's something less than at least being killed. So I want to just say it's time to go over to the translators. Let's take a look at what they did. Bibles. We have NIV. They say, "Do not withhold discipline from a child. If you punish them with the rod, they will not die. Do not withhold discipline from a child. If you strike him with a rod, he will not die." So we have strike, we have discipline, discipline. So correction, chastisement. Okay, so this word is very broadly used. I also want to suggest one more thing. I know I'm spending a lot of time on this, but I want to go back to the interlinear. And I want to go with the rod, he shall not die. If we go to, it's hard to see it unless you go to this version, forward in line. So it says, "Thou beatest him, thou beatest him, he shall die." Moot. Okay, not with the rod, thou beatest him if... Okay, so it's the way... it's hard to see it in this, actually. Not die. Come back up here to the camera here. I want to suggest... because this is like all over the place as far as like the translator's job working on it, interacting with the original language. I want to suggest that not only is it just saying that they won't die if you just spank them, or you chastise them, or there's some sort of correction, that it's okay to do that because they're not dead. Okay, well that's true, I guess. It's you don't want to murder your children. That's not the goal in correction. But I think there's a point here also that you can take it to say, if you correct your children, then they won't die. In other words, if I teach my son to come to me, that when I would say, "Hey, there's danger, come," that he doesn't hightail it the other way and die, get bit by the snake, or get hit by the car. And so in order for them to be blessed and to have a long life, to have a life long enough to be blessed, they need to be disciplined. They need to learn, they need to be taught that it's bad for you if you hightail it and run in the opposite direction than when dad and mom say come. All right? And so the idea is correction is good. Discipline is good. Chastisement is good. Now there is abuse and there's crossing the line, and when anger and that carnal nature gets all, full of rage, then you are definitely in danger of crossing the line of entering into the abuse of your child. But there's also an abuse of your children, and that's not disciplining them. That's abusive. That's neglectful, and it's hating your children. That's the way the Bible says it. If you don't discipline your children, then you hate your children. And so, the father is telling his son, do not withhold correction from a child. Have the discipline yourself to follow through and teach them what they need to know so that they don't die. And it's not like they're dead when you I survived many spankings. I survived many times where I was grounded to my room. I survived many times. I didn't die. And in fact, it's what kept me from dying. So, parents, grandparents, do not overlook the need for correcting your children. They need it. It's for their well-being. He says, "My son, if your heart is wise," in verse 15, "my heart will rejoice. Indeed, I myself, yes, my inmost being will rejoice when your lips speak right things. He's saying it matters so much to me that when you're what's coming out of your mouth, because it's a picture into your heart. What's coming out from your heart is, he's saying, man, I will rejoice. Indeed, I myself, yes, my inmost being will rejoice when your lips speak right things. Do not let, so here's a little application as we get to our discussion starter, and these are ways to direct your heart to your affections being aligned with God, with heavenly things. How can I spur on and encourage my heart to have its affections aligned to Christ and what God desires? Well, one of the things you can do is speak godliness, speak right things, speak truth. As in review, to be ready for instruction and words of knowledge, and the correction, the chastisement, whatever might be coming from one who loves me enough to correct me. There's another proverb that says the wound of a friend is better than the kiss of an enemy. It's that idea that we need to be looking for that corrective, loving, affectionate instruction and even chastisement if we need it, so that our heart can be directed towards what's good, what's pure, what's right, what's noble, what's just. Not what the riches of the world, not to see how much we can accumulate as a miser would, acting like we're generous when we're really, just a miser. We have an evil eye. All of that stuff comes out of the heart that is sick. But our hearts have been redeemed by the Redeemer. Verse 17, do not let your heart envy sinners. So how do we do that? How do we not let our hearts envy sinners? Well, part of that is understanding the consequences of sin. Not only are there consequences temporarily for sin, but ultimately there are eternal consequences for sin, and that one, the ultimate one, being death. So don't let your heart envy sinners. There's no good ending to that. Someone might seem to be getting away with something for a long time, but sin, man, it's just sending out heat-seeking missiles that are just going to come right back around and bring destruction to you. So don't envy a sinner. Don't let your heart look after that and envy and strive after, oh man, if I could only have what they have. Look, they are in a desperate situation. They just may not know it. They just may not know it. And I'll tell you what, some of the richest people in the world are the most unhappy people on the happy scale. They are very unhappy people. Just watch a reality TV show. Well, don't do that, actually. I'll just tell you about it. It's horrible. It's life zapping. And it ends oftentimes in suicide and drug overdose. It's not something to be envying of. But it says, be zealous for the fear of the Lord all the day. Be zealous for the fear of the Lord. So there's the solution to envying a sinner. Fear the Lord. Man, think about what God is capable of doing to you and to me apart from Christ. It would be separating us from Him. 18. For surely there is a hereafter, and your hope will not be cut off. So keep where you're headed up in front at all times. I'm going to heaven. That's where the payoff happens. It may not happen here. Oftentimes we see the fruit of spiritual living here, but not always. Sometimes it costs us a great deal. After all, there is a great cost to discipleship. But He is no fool who gives away what he can't keep, right? As we heard on this last weekend. Verse 19, hear my son and be wise, and guide your heart in the way. The way. That's what the early Christians were referred to as. They were the followers of the way. Before they were known as Christians, they were just, are you of the way? It goes all the way back here to Proverbs. Hear my son and be wise, and guide your heart in the way. Which way? the way of the cross, the way of the resurrection power, the way of the Spirit at Pentecost that was poured out on all the world, even us Gentiles. The way, the truth, the life. It's Jesus. That's the way. Verse 20, do not mix with, well, I like this one. I live in Dundee. Do not mix with wine bibbers. I like that. We would say winos in our everyday vernacular. The wine bibbers. I had fun with that on Blue Letter Bible, so you can click on that one if you want and have some fun with that. Do not mix. That's a kind of a fun play on words there, I think, because those who are alcoholics, they like mixed drinks. So, hey, don't mix with the winos. Or with gluttonous eaters of meat. Oh, wow. That might strike some of us. As we're approaching spring, we have barbecue season coming up. I went to my first barbecue already, even though we're still in the winter months. And wow, what a barbecue it was. It was themed after the Brazilian barbecue. So there was lots of beef there and lots of grilling going on. And you might guess one of my friends' name is Pastor Micah, a Brazilian at heart. So apparently I got to be careful how much I hang out with. No, I'm just kidding. But we do need to be careful with gluttony. Gluttony is not something that we often in Christian circles are super concerned about, especially when it comes to a Super Bowl party or a birthday or a barbecue in the backyard. Gluttonous eaters of meat. I think what this is referring to, though, is someone, again, wants back to this idea of a man given to appetite, that's desiring what is temporary, and that you're just living for what's temporary. You're just living for the next drink. You're living for the next steak, and that's it, right? And it gets out of control. Because why not? Why not have more than one drink? Why not have 8? Why not have 10? Why not just keep going? Why not one steak? Well, why not 2? Let's just keep them coming. And the gluttony and the alcohol and the drugs, they end up just becoming a way to drown out the consequences of that carnal nature. And we find ourselves where this proverb ends up, which is not a very pretty place. So don't mix with them. What fellowship does light have with darkness? And Paul writes to the Corinthians in that second letter. What fellowship does light have with darkness? Don't mix it up with people who have their affections on this world and this world alone. And if you're not careful, you can put words to it and say, "Oh, I'm being evangelistic." Well, are you being evangelistic, or are they? Who's spreading their news about how to live? And you got to be careful the way you mix it up with those caught up in the appetites of this world. It's good to be surrounded and have time in fellowship with believers, and to be encouraging one another and be building one another up to walk in the way. Verse 21 says, "For the drunkard and the glutton will come to poverty," and there's a consequence right there to being overcome by the substance, because you just can't get enough. It's never enough. You can't get no satisfaction, as the song says. So you just keep trying to satisfy, and it's enough for a minute, and then it's not enough, and then you got to go after more and more and more, and it just ruins you financially, among other things. And drowsiness will clothe a man with rags. So you end up dressing like a drunkard. 22. "Listen to your father who begot you, and do not despise your mother when she is old." So coming back to this idea of your affections being towards wisdom and instruction. This comes from your father and your mother. You know, it's interesting. I always find that as I watch, but also per experience in my own life, you hear people say, "Man, I'm saying the same things my father did. I'm saying the same things my mother did." Well, now I'm a dad, and my wife is a mother, and we are coming back around and we're saying the same things that our parents said, and our kids' response are about the same as what my response was. And one day they will come back full circle and go, wow, my mother and father had a lot more wisdom than I gave them credit for. Do not despise them. Listen to them. Listen to them. Verse 23, buy the truth and do not sell it. Buy it. Buy it. Yeah. Believe in it and get it. Buy it. Also, wisdom and instruction and understanding. So get it and don't get rid of it. Just acquire. If you're going to be a miser, just collect as much of that as you possibly can. Store it up that you might be able to walk in it. Truth, instruction, understanding, wisdom. Verse 24, the father of the righteous will greatly rejoice, and he who begets a wise child will delight in him. Let your father and your mother be glad, and let her who bore you rejoice. My son, give me your heart. That's what he's after. Don't give your heart to this woman that is going to drive you into a pit. Give me your heart. Listen to me, is what he's saying to his son. Give me your heart and let your eyes observe my ways. I want to give you wisdom. I don't want you to learn the hard way. 27, for a harlot is a deep pit, and a seductress is a narrow well. She also lies in wait as for a victim, and increases the unfaithful among men. 29, who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who has contentions? Who has complaints? Who has wounds without cause? Who has redness of eyes? Those who linger long at the wine. Those who go in search of mixed wine. Okay, so you can see this. There's a difference between, I want to just draw a little clarity here. There's two ways you can deal with substance, legal substance, like alcohol. Or even like I said above with meat. You can just avoid it altogether. That's one way you can deal with it. Oh man, there's a lot of danger associated with alcohol. I'm just going to avoid it altogether. Just going to be safe. That's one way you can deal with it. And if that's you, then great. God be with you, and may God bless that. And that really comes down to that personal decision. And if you say you're going to do something, follow through with it. In the Lord. That's right. That's good. Another way you can deal with this issue is that you can draw clear boundaries. So you can steer clear from it, or you can draw clear boundaries. That's another way you can deal with it. And be prayerful and thoughtful about what that boundary might be, whether it's with alcohol, whether it's with prescription medications. Of course, boundaries are given to you for illicit drugs, but what about the ones that are legal now? What about boundaries or staying clear completely from these things? You need to have a conviction. You need to stick to it. And you need to become the kind of person that doesn't have an appetite that is unquenchable. After these things, your appetite must be for spiritual food. It must be, I can't get enough of being around Christians and good fellowship. I can't get enough of the Word. I can't get enough of spending time with Jesus in personal devotion and prayer and adoration and worship. I can't get enough of those things. That's the direction we need to be heading. Not, I can't get enough of, and then fill in the blank. You got to draw boundaries. You're not going to have mom and dad always drawing boundaries for you. You need to have convictions about these things. So consider this: those who linger long at the wine, those who go in search of mixed wine. Do not look at the wine when it is red, when it sparkles in the cup, when it swirls around smoothly. At the last, it bites like a serpent and it stings like a viper. Your eyes will see strange things, and your heart will utter perverse things. Yes, you will be like the one who lies down in the midst of the sea, or like one who lies at the top of a mast, saying, "They have struck me, but I was not hurt. They have beaten me, but I did not feel it. When shall I wake that I may seek another drink?" And then you kind of end up looking like a pirate on a pirate ship. It will own you. These substances will own you if you gain an appetite and grow that appetite and a hunger for these things, man, there are two directions that you can head. I would encourage you to direct your heart. So that let's put the discussion starter up, and we'll end with that. God bless you, and please take some time to have some fellowship around this chapter with a spouse or some friends, even your small group. God bless you.